with the title ICT and Connectivism as a Tool for Learning in a Digitalized Age. The chapter 1, which is with what we will be beginning, comes with the introduction, the statement of the problem, the significance of the study, general and specific objectives, as well as assumptions, and the research questions of the thesis. For the introduction, as we already know, technology is advancing, and we need to keep advancing with it. It's not enough to just keep teaching classes like we used to do 100 years ago, because we're teaching the classes the same way we used to teach 100 years ago, but we have more resources than we used to 100 years ago. As it says right here, one of the challenges that we face as educators was, well, especially during the pandemic, was to adapt to these new situations. Most of the educators, most of the teachers were not ready for the challenge that the pandemic brought. So that was a big issue when it came to the schools and how they moved into the use of technology. The statement of the problem: students are not interested in their classes. They weren't turning any work in. The rates of assignment competition were really low the first semesters of observation, and as mentioned here, phones aren't just tools for emergencies. They can be used for assignment competition, for whenever you have any doubts, whenever you can't find any information, you can have your phone. If there's any concepts that the students don't know, they can easily look it up in a matter of seconds. And as well, teachers need to understand how to be able to use technology in their classes. The significance of the study. Globalization is making the world advance, right? So with it is technology. Technology is advancing as we become more and more connected. Technology keeps advancing with more new things that come with technology. So teenagers have many tools available to them, but they're not being taken advantage of. Teenagers are using most of their time on social media or gaming or whatever they use it for, but they're not really using it to do their homework. So with this study, we want to leave a precedent for schools to open themselves to the use of technology. So technology should be used in the schools in order to help the students with their assignments. And as you can see here, well, the faculty and the students will be the ones that will be benefited since, well, with the use of technology, the classes become more interesting, more engaging, and therefore the language acquisition is fostered even more. Here we have a quote from Western Governors University, which says, "Connectivism allows a community of people to legitimize what they're doing." So with the belief of connectivism, users create their own networks and they traverse those networks so that they're able to pretty much build on their knowledge, and it, as it says here, it empowers students and teachers to keep learning and learn in a more fun and interesting way for them. For the general objective of the research was to examine how the use of technology and technological tools impact students and teachers in English classes in the secondary school, Federal 2 Moises Sainz Garza. And for the specific objectives, which I had 2 of them. The first one was to identify and analyze the student's opinion on the efficacy of the use of technology in the classroom. And the second one was to review the teacher's outlook on the utilization of technological tools in the process of education. For the assumptions, I had one assumption, which was that if students are allowed to use technology in their day-to-day or in their learning activities, their academic performance will improve, as well as it will facilitate the learning process compared to those who do not have access to the same technology, or they're not able to utilize this technology. For the research questions, I had 3 research questions, but the main one was this one right here. Is technology useful or detrimental to learning for students in secondary school? The second was, are cell phones in the classroom a good tool or a threat to students? And the third one was, what impact will allowing the use of technology in students of second grade and secondary school Federal 2 have in their performance in English class? For the chapter 2 is the review of the literature, which will be seen the conceptual framework, the theoretical framework, and the state of the art. For the conceptual framework, at the beginning I had a lot of terms, and I was pretty much explaining the whole conceptual framework. So I narrowed it down to what pretty much 2 definitions of technology, because whenever I was looking at the term of technology, I came up with a lot of different definitions. As one of the authors that I did quote on the thesis says, technology and the definition really depends on who you ask about it. Whoever you ask about the definition is gonna give you pretty much a different answer every single time. Right here, Lane says that technology is about taking action to meet a need rather than merely understanding the workings of the natural world. What does this mean? For example, as previously mentioned, we're still teaching classes the same way we were teaching classes 100 years ago. And 100 years ago, people were riding in horses. Now they're riding in cars. Pretty much horses have become obsolete. So pretty much meeting the human need for technology, the human need for education, the human need to transport, whatever helps or meets the human need could be considered technology. And here, Arthur mentions that technology is a means to fulfill a human purpose. It may be a method or process or a device. So technology nowadays is most commonly associated with electronic devices, cell phones, computers, everything that has to do with pretty much electronic technology. But technology is anything that makes life easier. So for example, thousands of years ago when the wheel was invented, that was a type of technology, which even though if it was not electronic, it was still made or fulfill a human purpose. And lastly, I did include connectivism as well in the conceptual framework. Here, Downs is one of the pretty much co-founders of the theory of connectivism, along with George Siemens. Downs here mentions that at its heart, connectivism is pretty much that knowledge is distributed across a network of connections, and the ability for users to be able to create and traverse those networks at the same time. In the theoretical framework, we have Stephen Krashen with the second language acquisition. Stephen Krashen in language acquisition says that students need to be challenged with at least one level above their comprehension or above their English level, so as to keep things interesting but still challenging for them, so that they can keep learning. As well, it does mention that attitude and aptitude are linked to second language acquisition. Although they're not depending on each other, you can have one without the other at the same time. Sorry. And then I have the theory of connectivism as well, as previously mentioned, founded or proposed by George Siemens, and later Stephen Downs added to it. George Siemens believed that connectivism is it uses digital technology to help us solve problems that we have. This includes actions such as Googling, texting a friend, or searching for topical social media content. Connectivism believes using digital technology helps solve problems and deepens the understanding of the topic. So as well as George Siemens also believes that the information is not necessarily found within a user. It can be found in an organization or a database as well. And then for Downs, he added to the theory of connectivism by adding that, as opposed to constructivism, where learning is usually thought about or meant to be in a linear manner, connectivism actually, the knowledge, is acquired by it's acquired unintentionally. It's not, you don't really construct your knowledge as you do with constructivism. And yeah. And as well, as previously mentioned, is the belief that users should be able to create and transverse their own networks of knowledge. Here for the state of the art, I included this study right here by the UNESCO, which mentioned that there had been previous attempts before the pandemic for schools to go into remote learning, distance education, but they were not successful. It also mentions that 2/3 of the countries which had to rely on remote learning were not prepared for the challenges and the issues that they came up with when they moved to remote learning. It also mentioned that teachers did believe that since it pushed them to use that technology forcibly, they actually neglected or they refused using that technology even more because it had pushed them and they didn't necessarily want or knew what they were doing. So they pretty much took that as not necessarily a trauma, but they were negatively affected by that. And then here on this one, it says here, the idea of connectivism accepts the medium of technology as a part of the student's decision-making process. So as it mentions, nowadays it's pretty common that students can pretty much just ask their phone whatever question they want. They can just say, hey Google or Alexa, can you answer this for me? So with the use of artificial intelligence, that's becoming more and more relevant every day. And students need to learn how to use this technology responsibly and safely as well. The chapter 3 is the methodology, in which we'll be seeing the research type, the research strategy, the context, the population sample, and the data collection. For the research type, this research type was a qualitative type of research, since it aimed to document the opinion of students and teachers and to analyze their opinion on the use of technology in the classroom. The research strategy. The strategy utilized on this research was an ethnographic approach. Since the ethnography, is a qualitative method in which we collect data to analyze and understand the behaviors and how society functions. As we can see here, it's collected through observations and interviews made to whoever is on the research, to the actors involved on the research. For the context, the research was conducted in, as first mentioned, in secondary school Federal 2, Mercedes Sáenz Garza. It is a medium and medium-high socioeconomic level. Usually in the school they do have plenty of resources. They do have a pool which it's active. The students use it and everything. They have classes for swimming and everything. So and most of the students, almost literally every single student does have a cell phone, so that makes it easier for students to use technology, to also get in contact with them as well, because we did have like WhatsApp groups with all of them and everything. And this does result on the school being a very sought after school. So we do have students from pretty much all over the city coming. I would say that a big part of the students that I had under my teaching, they did come from areas like Riveras, Villas, all those areas that are like, they had to take the bus for about 30 minutes, 40 minutes just to get to school. So just because it's a pretty good school, it's a very sought after school. And the school has 1,146 students in total between the morning and an afternoon shift. Out of those 1,146 students, 642 are in the morning shift. The population sample. The population, as previously mentioned, we have 48 teachers in total between the two shifts, and 10 teachers were selected for the questionnaires, And there was 1,146 students in total, and 100 students were chosen for the questionnaire. So this was a non-probability type of sampling, since I did choose, as mentioned here, I did choose my sample due to convenience, since they were, since it was pretty convenient because they were right there. It was easy for me to access them and to access applying these questionnaires and questions to them. The data collection method, as previously mentioned, I did apply questionnaires to both teachers and students. For the teachers questionnaire, I did have to print it out since I did send the questionnaire. The questionnaires were both applied through Google Forms, but the teachers were not answering my Google Forms questionnaire, so I did decide to print out my questionnaire and handed it to them personally. The questionnaires had 10 questions each, which did have multiple choice, open-ended, and Likert type of questions. For the teacher's questionnaire, although they did have the option for open-ended questions, pretty much all of the questions, most of them just answer with short answers like yes, no, or they didn't really express themselves on the answers. And here in the chapter for results, I will go further into that. First, we will be seeing the student's questionnaire and then the teacher's questionnaire. For the student's questionnaire, the first question that was asked to them, as well as the teachers, we did ask the same question, was how much of your personal time do you spend using technology on a daily basis? So this question was asked to them to understand or try to figure out if they were actually using technology outside of school or pretty much in their daily life, and how convenient would it be to actually introduce that technology into the classroom. Because if students or teachers were not using technology, then it's not really relevant to be using it in their classroom. They were also asked, when you have been allowed to use technology during class, how good do you consider your learning has been? As you can see right here, most of the students answered more than 5, which would be considered an average. As you can see right here, it was a small amount of students that considered their learning not to be that good when technology has been present. And most of the students do consider their learning to be really good, as you can see right here. The highest one with 20, which they consider an 8 to be their learning, which is better than average. And the third question is, do you think that the use of technology or cell phones should be allowed in class? So as you can see right here, out of 100 students, only 2 of them answered no, which is represented as 2% right here. And most of the students here, 50% answered yes, while 48% answered that yes, but only when necessary. So this means that students are actually aware that they can use technology, but they need to be careful of what they do and how they use it, and they shouldn't just be like on their phone playing games or using social media during class. Have you ever received a course on the correct and safe use of technology? As you can see here, 43% of the students mentioned that yes, they have received training at the school. 23% mentioned that outside of the school they have received training, and only 34%, which will count for 1/3 of the total sample, mentioned that they had not received any training. After I did apply the instruments, I did ask the students, because since I had not seen any previous training or any training from the school, I did ask them, where did you receive this training from? And most of them said that they had received training from teachers in particular, like their technology and their technology teacher. And then here I did put this. This is a long answer in Spanish, but I think I thought it was pretty relevant to the results. The last question that was asked to students was an open-ended question in order to actually understand what they thought about using technology in the class. So they were asked, what do you think about the use of technology in the classroom? And the student did answer that they felt that teachers are attacking technology. As I did observe in the school that I was at, teachers are reluctant to the use of technology. They don't like it. They have previously observed students taking pictures of them or making stickers out of their faces and everything, so that actually make them get mad and make them be reluctant to the use of this technology. As you can see here, I put these squares to maintain the privacy of the teachers. But the student does mention that teachers actually get on their phones on the during class. So they're instead of teaching class, they just get on their phone and give the students the assignment. So students consider that they should be able to use technology, because if it is used properly, there shouldn't be any issue with the use of it in the class. As far as the teacher's questionnaire, as previously mentioned, we did ask them how much of their personal time they spend using technology on a daily basis. And as you can see right here, there was 10 teachers that answered the questionnaire. 5 of them answered that they use their phone 5 or more hours during the day. 4 of them answered that 3 or 4 hours, and none of them answered less than 1 hour, I'm sorry, and only 1 answered that 1 or 2 hours. So teachers as well as students are using their phones, are using technology on their daily life. So it is relevant to use technology in the classroom. The second question that they were asked was, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is the use of technological resources as a tactic support for the teaching process? As you can see right here, they were given the scale of 1 to 10. None of them answered anything below 5. So they consider that technology is helpful to the use of technological resources, is helpful as a tactic support for the teaching process. For the third question, we asked teachers if they have received any training regarding ICTs. They were also asked if they knew what ICT meant, but only one teacher answered that they didn't know what it meant, and they literally just answered yes. They didn't give me the definition, so I didn't include that result. But here, as you can see, this was 6 teachers, 6 teachers out of the 10 teachers mentioned they have not received any training at all from outside or from their institution, while 2 teachers mentioned that they did train themselves with courses or diplomas, and only 2 of them mentioned having received training from their institution, which I found pretty weird, that out of 10 teachers, only 2 of them mentioned receiving training from the school. The fourth question was, do you believe that technological resources help in the acquisition of learning? And as you can see here, again, 6 teachers mentioned that yes, because it could facilitate the finding of resources by students. While 3 of them mentioned that it only helps them partially, depending on how they use the technology. And only 1 of them mentioned that no, it did not serve to help them, since it only served as a distraction for students. And on the last question, they were asked, if you use any technological resources in your class, how effective have you considered it towards the learning of the students? As you can see right here, none of them answered anything below 7. So teachers, whenever they have used technology in the past in their class, they have considered the learning to be really good, or to be really effective. So that brings the question of, why are they not using technology if they consider technology to be good for the classroom, or to have given good results when applied. For chapter number 5, we have the conclusions, and as you can see right here, as you can see right here, we have the objectives. We have the main objective, which was proposed at the beginning of the presentation, and we have the two specific objectives. So the main objective, which was to examine how the use of technology and technological tools impact students and teachers in English class in secondary school, Federal Dos Moises Sainz Garza. Although we did have certain limitations due to time restrictions, and there was no way to do a case study since I previously mentioned time restrictions, it was observed that the students do try whenever the use of technology is possible in the class. Um, the specific objectives, which was to identify and analyze the students' opinion on the efficacy of the use of technology in the classroom. Students did mention that they want to use technology, in the classroom, but and they're actually aware that they need to be careful with what they do and how they use it in order to be able to use this technology. The third one, which was review the teacher's outlook on the utilization of technological tools in the process of education. As previously mentioned, teachers, they're reluctant to the use of technology, whether it be because of lack of training, or they don't feel that they're knowledgeable enough to be able to use this technology. They're pretty much just, they don't want to use this technology even if they're using it in their life and they have seen positive results. Due to lack of training, they're still not using it. And here, student teachers are, well, as Spirit mentioned, they're using their phones a large amount of their day. So they're using this technology, but they're not using it properly. They're not, they don't know how to, how to transverse those networks that were previously mentioned with connectivism. As we can see with, like, for example, with students, most of the time when you give them an assignment, they'll just go on Google translate everything. They're not really doing the work, or they're not really learning anything. They're just doing everything in Spanish, translating it, and just copying it into their book. For the research questions that we had, is technology useful or detrimental to the learning of English for students in secondary school? As previously mentioned, due to time limitations, we weren't able to do like a case study or something like that. But I was able to observe, as an example, I did have another classmate that was practicing alongside me, and he did not allow for any use of cell phones at all in his classes. I did allow the use of cell phones in mine, and with his results, he failed about 6 or 7 students per class due to the fact that he was sometimes very strict with the use of cell phones. The students couldn't even answer calls, even if it was their parents or anything like that. While I fostered the use of technology, and it gave me good results with students. Out of my 300 students that were under my teaching, I only failed 6 students, pretty much. So that was a 98% success rate compared to 48% rate that was before or whenever we started observing at school. Right here, our cell phones in the classroom are good, or a good tool or a threat to students. As previously mentioned, they're actually good for students whenever you know how to use them. Like I mentioned before, 100 years ago, people were riding horses. Nowadays, they're riding cars. Whenever cars were introduced, people thought that they were dangerous. You can crash, you can kill somebody, and yeah, all those things that happen if you don't follow the rules, if you don't use the car properly, if you don't know how to do it, that can happen. So if as long as you're using cell phones properly, you're using it for whatever you need to do, and you're following the rules, there shouldn't be any issues. And well, as previously mentioned, what impact will allowing the use of technology? As previously mentioned, it did have a good impact on my students, as most of them did improve on their grades. As well, English was the highest subject regarding grades amongst the whole school. The students had the highest grades on the English class after a practice period. And here with the assumption, if students are allowed to use technology during their learning activities, their academic performance will improve, as well as facilitate the learning process compared to those who don't have access to or are unable to utilize technology. So like I already mentioned to you, we had this comparison with the students with my classmate, that he did ended up failing a lot of students, while I only failed about 6 students, and there were those students that didn't turn anything in, that you couldn't really do anything or couldn't help them at all. For the theory of connectivism. As connectivism is a new learning theory, we need to foster its practice and widen its knowledge. So as more people become aware of connectivism, maybe more teachers will start to use it. They will start to understand how to make those connections and how to teach their students to use this technology properly. The use of technology is important in the classroom, and training is necessary for teachers to feel confident about trying new things. So teachers need to be trained with the use of technology. They're not going to be using technology if they don't know what they're doing. Sometimes they can be afraid of, for example, students knowing more than them or knowing more about technology than them. Here for the limitations, there were already some of them were already previously mentioned. We had restrictions of time. We had the attitude from the teachers which were not answering the questionnaires. At the end of our practice period, on the set meetings and everything, they did prohibit technology, or pretty much the use of electronic devices. Cell phones were prohibited along the whole school, so students weren't allowed to use their phones anymore, which I was glad that was at the end of my practice and not during the practice, because that would have affected pretty much all the results. And the head teacher involvement. The head teacher was really not present at the time, and she had some issues with other teachers. So that could have also affected some of the attitude and the answers from other teachers, as maybe they didn't answer, or they gave shorter answers due to the relationship that we had with the head teacher. And well, as previously mentioned, technology should be fostered in the classroom and should be used to be able to develop digital skills, critical thinking, creativity, and to increase the motivation of the students. We need to stay ahead of the game and always be open to trying new things out and not get stuck in the past. And lastly, the suggestions for future research. The suggestions are a connectivism case study, as previously mentioned. If there had been more time to do a case study, that would be more interesting to compare the results with a group that's not able to use technology and a group that is able to use technology all the time. And here in the bigger circle, we have AI, which I do believe that artificial intelligence is a topic that should be researched for the future, as it's becoming a more relevant topic with every day that goes by. And here are my references.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. David, we'll proceed with the next part of the exam. So, can you help us with bringing the chair here so you can have a seat? No water. Okay, we'll start with teacher Haas.
Yes.
Okay. You said that the word technology is different. It depends on the person. What is technology for you?
To me, I most closely relate technology to electronic or digital technology. For me, technology is pretty much like the new cell phone that's coming out, the new games that come out. So I consider myself a pretty technological savvy type of person. So I always like technology, and yeah, for me, technology. Although I do know technology is pretty much anything that's new. It doesn't have to be anything electronic or digital. For me, whenever I'm asked about technology, I do associate it directly with digital technology.
And what do you think students, teenagers, think about technology?
I do believe I did have the opportunity. Well, whenever my head teacher was absent or went away for a certain time, we did work with a lot of worksheets sometimes, or whenever we would go away, she would ask us to make worksheets for the students. The students don't really know about like technology like that. They did have a struggle with identifying like technologies such as like MP3s, like Walkman players. They didn't know what those were. Like even USB memories. They asked me like, "What is this, teacher?" And I had to explain to them. So for them, technology is just pretty much anything that's really new. They don't consider like, for example, the invention of the wheel technology.
Okay, so how can the use of technology in the classroom be balanced with the traditional teaching and create effective learning environment?
Well, I do believe, like I mentioned, we're still teaching classes as we were 100 years ago. So 100 years ago, we used to teach classes which was a student's teacher whiteboard. We're still doing the same thing. It's not, well, as you can see with the context that we have, not all schools are able to implement this technology. I was actually fortunate enough to be in this school that had a lot of resources. Pretty much all students had cell phones. But I know there will be some schools where students are not gonna have cell phones. Maybe even their parents are not gonna have cell phones. I won't be able to have this WhatsApp group that I had in this school. So I know that's gonna make it harder to like implement this technology in the classroom. But I think they can be a balance depending on how you apply this technology. Like for example, like I was mentioning, if you go to school in the mountains, there's not going to be any technology. You're just going to have to work the old traditional way. But also, technology does not have to be electronic. You can also have didactic material, anything that's innovating for the students that can be considered a different type of technology.
Okay, so here, what does education need to provide in order to provide students proper use of connectivity in the classroom?
Okay, well, first of all, I do believe that here in Mexico, the resources are not put into the right place. So there is resources, there is money, but whenever schools are given money, they usually don't utilize it good, or the resources tend to go to other places instead of like infrastructure or things that actually the school needs. And then, for example, I've seen some other schools in which they have like internet for students, but the students don't have access to that internet. They need to ask for like codes, or they only have like 15 minutes of internet to use. So I do believe that it just goes down to training. The teachers need to be trained. They need to know how to use technology, how to implement this technology, because otherwise they're just not gonna want to use it.
Okay, thank you. And as a teacher, how can you teach students to use AI in like with responsibility and ensure that they are learning?
Well, I believe it's really hard to teach students how to use AI. As always, there's gonna be that one student that just doesn't want to do the work, that just thinks that it's easier to just ask ChatGPT for the answer. But as teacher Jesus did mention, I remember him mentioning that whenever you read something from your students, you learn how they write, how they express themselves. So whenever you see something really repetitive, it's pretty obvious that it's not them writing it. If I read something that I'm just reading it and it looks like something that I would have written myself, it's pretty obvious that students are not doing it. Someone's doing it for them. And I've had those cases with students where I asked them who wrote this, and they're like, me. And you know that they don't know how to write like that. It's too well written. And as teachers, we don't have the time to be checking 100 sites, 100 quotes, 100 websites on a day. So pretty much just with practice, with fostering, with experience, and fostering the correct use and the responsible use of this AI. It can be used as a tool for inspiration, or for whenever you're blocked and you can't find an answer. But it's not correct to just copy the answer and just pass it as your work.
Thank you. You're going to work with teenagers. So what are some potential concerns or risks when you allow to use the technology or the cell phone in the classroom?
Well, as previously mentioned, at the end of our practice period, we did have the school did decide to prohibit the use of cell phones in the whole school. And this was due to teachers complaining about students taking pictures of them, making stickers. They say they felt threatened and everything. I did have a personal conversation with some of my students about the topic and about the specific teachers that did mention, like students making stickers out of them and being offensive and everything. And well, it's usually down to the teacher as well. Technology is always going to be present, and there's always going to be mean people or people that make fun of whatever you do or whoever you are. So it does also come down to you, because I did ask some of the students. They did mention making stickers pretty much out of all the teachers, but that one teacher specifically, like they did not have a good relationship with. She was very mean to the students. She was an old teacher, so she was very reluctant to like the use of technology, the use of cell phones, all of that. She didn't like seeing a cell phone. She was the type of teacher that took the cell phone away, took it to the office, and you wouldn't see it until the end of the week. So, and when I asked students about them making stickers out of myself or anything, they even showed me the stickers, and they weren't bad stickers or anything. They were just like nice pictures of me. That I mean, I thought I looked kind of good and everything. So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And the last one, how did you use technology in your classes?
Well, in my classes, as Cruz mentioned, I would let the students use their cell phones. I did have one rule that I told them pretty much at the beginning of the school year. I told them, you guys are going to be able to use your cell phones during class, but only for school work. As soon as you finish, you put your phone away. You're not allowed to go into social media or play games or just be surfing the internet. So I will be walking around the classroom pretty much all the time whenever they were using their phones to be checking on what they were doing and everything. And all of them were on the translator. I only had one case, pretty much the only and first case, where one student was not using the translator. And I took his phone away and his privileges for the rest of the semester. And that pretty much told all the other students that they should follow the rules, and I didn't have any issues with it, or any problems with the use of cell phones.
Thank you.
Thank you, teacher. Teacher Sonia?
Now, I know that with your research, you proved that you can have technology and you can use it wisely, cell phones in the classroom. Now, how do we do it to convince schools that it can be possible?
Well, I do believe, well, first of all, I do want to say that my topic was thanks to you. Because in that trip in Guanajuato, like I was going to towards the use of social media and everything. And after that talk we had about like students don't really know how to use social media, so how are you going to use social media to teach them? And while doing research and everything, I found some connectivism, and that's what guided my research pretty much. But I do believe that the schools need to understand that we're moving forward, that technology should be a factor that should be considered into education. Because like I mentioned a couple of times, we're still teaching classes as the same way we were teaching 100 years ago. We're teaching classes for students that were learning 100 years ago. Students are not interested in the same things they were. They don't really care about just reading in the notebook and just copying work on their notebook. I'm sorry, because that's what they did 100 years ago, because they didn't have any other opportunity or any other alternative. But now we do, and we're still not taking advantage of that. We're not using it. So I do believe that I mean, pretty much just with this research, schools should understand and comprehend that technology is a useful tool for them. It's not a threat as long as it's properly used.
All right. And you mentioned that it could be helpful for motivation, to promote critical thinking and creativity. And my question is, how can you teach students to be more critical on the information, on the way they use their cell phones in the classroom?
Okay, so as always, there's certain websites that are reliable and some that are not. The students need to be able to learn that they need to be taught as well. You know, they're not just gonna learn Googling. So they do need to be thought about the topic that they're seeing, and that's why the term connectivism comes up, right? So as Downs mentioned, it's this ability for them to create and transverse networks of knowledge. So they're creating their own networks of knowledge and connecting them, with, oh, okay, so I see this right here. This has to do with this other topic that we saw, or there was this really good example about, for example, learning in your political science class, and you're seeing about the elections, and you're not interested, you're not learning what you're seeing, but then you go on your phone and you see on Facebook that Donald Trump said this about this other politician, and you're really interested in that, but you like gossip or you like whatever, and you go into the article, it's pretty much the same thing you learn in class with other words, with different, setting or presentation, and that's more interesting to you, and you learn better in that way.
So in a way, you mentioned that it's very unintentional, right?
Yeah.
But as a teacher, how can we make that intentional?
Well, like I mentioned, with constructivism, learning is it's made in a linear manner. You construct from your previous knowledge. With connectivism, the students need to construct those networks by themselves. As a teacher, we are pretty much just a guide. So since students are using technology, they need to learn how to pretty much where to go to find that information. As teachers, well, the only thing we can do is just pretty much guide them. We can't be over, like, we have 40 students, we cannot be on 40 cell phones at the same time. So pretty much just guide them whenever they have a question, assist them in the proper way. And that goes with the training that the teachers do need to receive in order to be able to pretty much give that guidance to the students.
All right, so in this guidance, how can we provide or give them support to be more creative without just grabbing something from the internet and copying it and presenting it as their own?
Yeah, well, with the technology, we have all these resources that are available to us. Resources, for example, like Canvas, Genially, that are really good tools for students to be creative, to make these creations that otherwise, like, for example, if you tell me, I'm not really a creative person or an imaginative person, so if you tell me, like, do an infographic by hand, it's pretty much gonna be a simple infographic. It's gonna look like an essay or something. But if you tell me, like, oh, do an infographic in Canva or Genially or this other resources that are available, I'm gonna have all those templates available to me, all those resources that I can just grab pretty much that are already available for me, and I can just go through some, like, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of resources in a matter of minutes.
So there are these apps and these tools that are specifically designed for students and for teachers, but I don't think there is a lot of training. Or in your research, did you find programs or classes or any type of training for teachers?
Yeah, no, I did not find any resources. Or also, it goes on to the factor of time. Most of the teachers don't really have the time to do this training because the training is not provided by your school or your institution. You need to look for this training outside of the school, outside of your work time. So that goes into your personal time, and that becomes harder. That makes it harder. Life gets in the way. So it's really harder for teachers to be able to find this training outside of the institution. And the fact that institutions are still not giving this proper training, even after the pandemic, even after what we experienced, they're still not giving that proper training to teachers.
Some of the training that I've found is just how to create homework, like how to create homework in Moodle or on Google Classroom, not really how to integrate it into the classroom. So my question is, would you be interested in designing some training or some tools for teachers?
Yeah, I think it would be it's a pretty interesting topic. So I have seen with research that one of my companies is doing. Research tends to focus on students most of the time. if you look at, well, even the researchers that my classmates did, they are all focusing on students. Nobody really focuses on teachers. There's no research being done about about teachers, I'm sorry. Here, for example, she's doing a research about the loss of your teacher identity, right? So as you become a teacher, you get demotivated, whether you from your school, from the school staff, the resources, the students don't want to learn. So all those factors do come into play as well. So yeah, I think I would be really interested in creating a proper training for teachers that they're interested in, that gives that identity, alive.
I'm thinking about, like, in your research, the teachers, I guess combining the 50% and the 40% that spend at least 3 hours a day on the internet and, well, on the cell phone, right? But I think to myself, well, they're probably on the internet and they're probably on social media, right? And they're
Yes.
probably just thinking that students are doing the same thing. But with your research and with the talks with the students, what apps do they use on their cell phones, or what do they do in these?
Actually, the students, I did not include in the results, but they were asked, and the teachers, all of the teachers mentioned using the app of Preve, which is an app used by the school to be in communication with the parents about whether the students are absent or if they fight, or they also, it's not only for issues, you can also send them for congratulating students. If they did a good job, or if they received some kind of a recognition, you can send like a private to the parents, letting them know that. They mentioned using the apps of Kahoot, as well as mostly just PowerPoint. So they're not really working with this other, with pretty much all the tools and resources that we have available. They mentioned using technology some of the times, or most of the times, not all the times. So that does make us think that the time they're using technology, or they're considered that they're using technology, they're pretty much just using PowerPoint presentations for their students.
Yeah, so still keeping it traditional, right?
Yeah.
Now, you, hold on, let me just find, I have one question here. You mentioned that technology was anything new, and specifically digital technology, right? But could we use cell phones without internet in the classroom?
Yes. Like for example, here in the school that I was at, students, most of the students did not have data or data, and they were not able to be connected to the internet of the school, since it was just for teachers. So I did mention to them that there is some apps that don't require internet. There's, for example, dictionaries that can translate from Spanish to English without the use of an internet connection. And yeah, it doesn't really have to be connected to the internet, as long as you know that there's these resources available that you can use without it.
Because I think that maybe teachers will feel less threatened
Yes.
if they felt like more confidence of the students' use of cell phones, and then go on to use internet and integrate it into the classroom. I guess for me that's really it. I would just like to make you commit to developing teaching training. Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, teacher. Okay, there are not many questions left. You mentioned that sometimes teachers feel threatened, right? Maybe by the use of technology by students, or sometimes by the lack of resources that they have. How do you consider the use of technology, or the overuse of technology, a threat for you as a teacher? What happens if you use technology too much, or if your practicum is like technological approach, but something happens?
Yeah, so if we tend to rely on technology that much, it can also result to be detrimental. So students, if we just give them the phone, if we just give them, like, for example, access to the internet and stuff, they're just gonna look for the information and just, like I mentioned previously, just go into Google Translate, just paste the information, just copy to their notebook. So I do believe that they need to be teach, like how to do the work properly. That, for example, Google Translate is just it's just a tool. It's not something that does your work for you, or that should be doing all of your work for you. If you need to translate one or two words, yeah, you can use it. But I mean, you find that as a teacher, whenever you're reading something, you can tell right away if it's coming from Google Translate, because it will just translate random words to. It does not understand context. So I do believe that that's important. You repeat the question?
Yeah, that if you rely too much on technology, do you think that it can be a threat?
Yes.
I mean, you had your whole lesson plan based on the use of, I don't know, worksheets, online worksheets or videos, and then boom, no internet for you.
Yeah.
So that's a threat, right? Obviously, but what would you do, or how can you improve this if something like that happens?
Well, yeah, like as previously mentioned, not in all contexts are we going to be able to use that technology, so, or even if we have all the resources available, you can always have the lights go off, or there be no energy, so, pretty much as teachers, we're always improvising, we're always making these adjustments, you gotta, I mean, as you practice and, teach more classes, you understand that lesson plans are just pretty much paper that you're gonna have there, but you're not really gonna follow it. You have it there to be able to have that support that you have, but you also have gotta have these adequations. Like, for example, like if a student doesn't see, they gotta be up front. If the students don't have a cell phone, they can get in the corner, or in case that they don't have any cell phones, you gotta have that other alternative for them to be able to complete the work and not just rely on the cell phone all the time.
Like a backup plan, right?
Yeah.
Or most of the time, we need something else to get a hold of. Okay, perfect. I believe that there is a mindset, like a very established mindset in some of the teachers. What would you do, or what would you recommend in order to change that mindset? That sometimes they go against technology.
Well, it's hard, for example, with some of the older teachers to be able to get to them, with this new stuff technology. So I do believe that it just comes down to the training. If teachers are not receiving training, they're just not gonna want to do it. I'm not gonna, if I don't know how to give a math class, I'm not gonna go and teach a math class. So if I don't know how to use technology, I'm not gonna teach my class with technology, because that's gonna be, maybe I'm gonna make a mistake, or maybe students are gonna make fun of me. So I do believe that it just comes down to training. There should be proper training for teachers and students alike, for them to learn how to use the technology properly, and for teachers to learn how to utilize that technology in the classroom, and teach their students how to be responsible at the time that they're using it.
And do you think that it all comes down to motivation, to teachers' motivation? Because now, with the use of the internet, you can find pretty much everything online, right? But sometimes you're not motivated to look for an app, or just to take an online course, or you can do it, but do you think it comes down to motivation? Or why teachers are not training themselves into the use of technology?
Well, they're not training themselves, first of all, because of, like I mentioned before, it goes on to their personal time. They're not receiving this training from their schools, so they have to look for the training outside of their work time. It goes into their personal time, and besides that, they still, like, for example, more than likely they're gonna have to pay for that training. So it just becomes an issue whenever you have to pay for it, whenever you have to take up your own time in order to do that training. Because as I said, life gets on the way. Maybe you have kids, maybe you have business that on the side that you gotta attend to, and you can't really do this training. So I mean, it does come down to motivation, not solely motivation, but motivation is an important factor, because if I'm not receiving the training, I'm just not gonna be motivated to use technology, and I'm not gonna care for it honestly, because I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know how to use it.
I might spend some cash paying an online course, knowing that that course might help me reducing my time
Yeah.
when grading or doing, but maybe that's some of the reason, or that's one of the reasons why we're not like investing on that kind of training, right? Because we don't know the advantages of using technology or apps or grading systems or many other things, right? So, okay, it is a mindset. Before the pandemic, we were trying to use, well, here at least in school, we're using Moodle, but there's a struggle, like every semester we start, there's a training. But then you see like the same person raising their hand, like, I don't understand. Did you see a difference between, before the pandemic and during the pandemic when teaching online? Or was it the same thing as just using PowerPoint, but instead of being here, just at home? Or did you see a difference between teachers who were like interested and training themselves, or using connectivism, or it was just the same?
Well, I did observe, because I did practice with different teachers. I did practice with one of my classmates, and when I practiced with him, it was virtually during the pandemic, and I remember just using pretty much PowerPoint presentations. We weren't innovating. It was just pretty much the same thing, but with a PowerPoint presentation through Google Meet or that sort of stuff. But I also did have the chance to practice with someone from a higher grade. And whenever I had the opportunity to practice with her, it was also virtually. And she pushed me to use a lot of resources, to use a lot of tools, to pretty much have fun with the classes, not just be teaching, not just be pretty much reading off of your PowerPoint presentation and telling students, oh, this is the way it's supposed to be. But having an interactive lesson using these other tools, like for example, with Geniali, the climb to the mountain, with Kahoot, that sense of competitiveness, pushes the students to keep moving forward, to keep learning.
Using a different approach, right?
Yeah.
Okay. When it comes to the term connectivism, can you give me an example of using connectivism? You gave us an example before, and you mentioned that you might learn unintentionally, right? Do you really learn unintentionally using connectivism? Or as a teacher, you try to make them learn intentionally?
Yes, so the purpose of connectivism, as previously mentioned, is utilizing digital technology, to teach your classes. Technology makes things easier, so
It's okay, so just an example of connectivism.
Well, yeah, like I mentioned previously, with teacher Sonia, this mindset, that if you're in a class, maybe you don't really like learning in the class, you don't like learning from just listening to the teacher. Here in La Normal, you gotta listen to the teacher for 2 hours, each class. So it just gets to a point where your brain can't take it anymore. Your brain is not receiving that information, So with connectivism, with the use of digital technology, students can work at their own rhythm. They can take their time. They can learn the way they want and with the resources they want, since we have so many available to us.
Yeah, basically, so I asked this question because it's like one of your main variables, right?
Yeah.
And most of the teachers, or us and many of the teachers, don't know the theory. Sometimes they say, well, theorists say that it's not a theory, that it's so new and it's not proven, but it is, and it is a new way of learning. So I think we need to understand that times have changed. Many of the schools don't have the technological resources to use connectivism, but we need to understand that everything's changing, and that we need to be aware of that. So you have like a great responsibility as a teacher, and maybe as a teacher, future teacher training or principal, or I don't know, there's a long way, right? But to change that mindset, and that the new generations are very different from the old ones, and it is I think a very difficult thing to do, but if you start like just step by step, it can be done. Okay? One last question: if you had the chance to change your data collection method in order to get or have a different result, what would you do? What would you change?
I would not leave everything to the last minute. As you all know, I left everything till the last month, the last couple of days, the last week. It was really a stressful situation. I would wake up, thinking thesis. I wake up shaking, I cried so much. It was just really stressful. So I think that the thing that I would change the most, or that I would recommend, is just keeping up with the times, following the times, doing everything in the correct order. And I would have loved to have done, as I mentioned, a case study on connectivism, having being able to compare the actual results that the students are getting, the difference in grades from whenever we started to whenever we finished, if the grades improved or not, or if they actually went down. I was able to see that the grades went up, competition rates also went up, but I would like to have that time, take that time to actually be able to analyze it, give more time for maybe the instruments to be answered, allow that time to make deeper questions so that we can have a more thorough analysis.
Do you think that time impacted your results?
Yes, definitely.
Well, I think I don't have any questions. Okay, thank you very much. If you give us like 5